Hello and welcome today's episode of All Fired Up with Brandon Ramsey. We are here on the Brandon Ramsey College Basketball Show YouTube channel. Please make sure you are subscribed to the channel so you can catch these episodes every Wednesday at 12:30 p.m. Eastern Time live. You can jump into the comments, ask any questions that you may have on the world of college basketball. You can also find the Brandon Ramsey College Basketball Show on Spotify or where you do listen to your podcasts. I have episodes up every Monday and Friday morning of that show. And then also, whether it be this YouTube show, whether it be the podcast, whether it be all of my written work on KentuckySportsRadio.com, part of the On3 Sports Network, you can find all of that living on my Twitter at BRamseyKSR. So definitely give me a follow there as well. So today it's February 28th, Wednesday, and I guess we do have, tomorrow is not March. This is a leap year, so we get one more day of February, and then March is finally here. It's right around the corner, just going to be about 48 hours instead of 24 this year in 2024. But we're getting to the point now where there's generally just speaking about 3 games left in the regular season for the power conference teams. Some of the mid-major, low-major conference tournaments actually get started a little sooner. But Champ Week's right around the corner. We're going to have a bracket in our hands in just over 2 weeks. All that good stuff. So we are to an exciting point in the college basketball season. Right off the top, though, thinking back to some of the action last night, there weren't a ton of games on Tuesday night. Tonight is a much larger slate, and we'll get into all of that later. But I think you do have to start. I always say I do these shows in order to kind of broaden my horizons and talk about college basketball as a whole and not just Kentucky. However, Kentucky a lot of times is the story of college basketball. So we do have to spend some time talking about the Wildcats and what they did last night in Starkville, going down to Mississippi State and winning 91-89. They completed the series sweep of the Bulldogs this season. They won the game back on January 17th. I believe it was at Rupp Arena, 90-77. Then again, last night they win 91-89 against the Bulldogs at the Hump in Starkville. A lot of interesting things happened throughout this game. Coming into last night's action, over the past 2 weeks, Kentucky had been a different team defensively. We certainly had seen that play out on the court with the eye test. The metrics back that up. 2 weeks ago, when Kentucky beat Ole Miss at Rupp Arena and then went on the road and won at Auburn, Kentucky had the best defensive efficiency rating per Bart Torvik that week in the country, best in the country. That's after posting like around a 100th best defense for most of the season. That week they were best in the country. They backed it up last week. Not as good of performances in the loss at LSU. Obviously, gave up 95 despite blowing out Alabama on Saturday, but still. Now you had a 2-week sample size. They were still top 10 during that 2-week sample size in adjusted defensive efficiency per Bart Torvik. Last night, we reverted to some old bad habits, especially early on defensively. There was way too much ball watching. Mississippi State was able to get guys kind of cutting along the baseline as we stood there and stared at the ball. It happened to Justin Edwards. It happened to Reed Shepard. Adu Thiero got beat early defensively a couple times. Ugonna Onyenso certainly had his fair share of issues with Tolu Smith inside. But Kentucky continued to hang around throughout that first half. It always felt like the Bulldogs were outplaying the Cats, for sure. At least that's how I felt watching the game. But Kentucky was always able to keep it within 5, within 4, within 7, whatever it may be, because they did keep scoring the basketball a little bit in stretches. Now, it wasn't a great end to the first half. Luckily, DJ Wagner hit that 3 late to send Kentucky into the locker room only down 8. Could have been double figures. However, I kind of had a dichotomy of opinions, and Eddie, I'll get to your comments here in just one second. But I felt good in one way because honestly, I didn't think Kentucky was playing great. I knew they were really struggling defensively, and though I still am not overly confident in this group defensively, they had been good enough over those past couple of weeks. I did feel like we were going to see some changes in the second half. They were going to guard better, and I always just trust in the offense. Like 35 and a half for Kentucky is not that great. I knew they could come out and score 50 and give themselves a chance to win this game. I tweeted as much when they come out and score 56. But one of the reasons I was a little concerned, honestly, was at halftime, Mississippi State did not have any second chance points, and Kentucky had made 7 threes, and they were still trailing by 8. So I was like, gosh, like there you gave yourselves a chance to be up. You would like if you would have told me in the first half Kentucky shoots or makes 7 threes against a team that's one of the best in the country at taking away threes, and they would have given up 0 second chance points to one of the best offensive rebounding teams in the country, I would have thought we were up 8 instead of down 8. So that was a little concerning. But again, I always trust this offense. I always know that they are going to get things going sooner rather than later. And oh boy, did they get it going to the tune of 56 points in the second half. Obviously, we saw what Reed Shepherd did. I mean, he scored 16 of his game high 32 in the final, like 12 or so minutes of the game. Also had 7 assists. Was just outstanding. Kentucky goes back. Coach Calipari dials up some floppy action late in the game. Shout out to my YouTube show with Kentucky Sports Radio, where I host alongside Zach Gagan and Stephen Peak, floppy action there on the KSR YouTube channel. But Rob Dillingham gets a 3 flare in the floppy late to put Kentucky up for the first time of the game, 72-71 down the stretch. I mean, it's kind of typical Kentucky basketball. And I know I'm starting to ramble here, but I think this is the game to talk about from last night. Kentucky's up 8 with, I think, 57.4 seconds, and it ends up being a tie game. Now, some fans kind of feel like it was a collapse. There was a couple mistakes. Like Ugonna Onyenso cannot give up an and one at that point. You either have to foul in a way that he can't finish the layup, or you have to just get out of the way and let him lay it up. And then obviously the Reed Shepherd turnover was, kind of mind-bogglingly bad. You had 2 timeouts at the time. Like, just call a timeout if you can't get the ball advanced beyond half court. But otherwise, like, it was just Josh Hubbard going insane. If he just needs to miss one of those 3 threes, and Kentucky wins the game comfortably, because then you rebound it, get fouled, go shoot your 2 free throws. So, like, that's just even as elite as he is, he's an excellent shooter. Had already made 76 coming in to last night's game. It's not like that was a out-of-body experience, but still, he's not going to go 7 of 14 and make 3 in the final minute very often. So I'm not as torn up about the ending. I'm glad Kentucky was able to win the game and get the heck out of there with a win, but you got to give credit to Kentucky. Now, their last 3 wins are at Auburn, blowing out Alabama at Rupp Arena, and then at Mississippi State. That's as good of a 3-game stretch as anybody's had in the country this season. 3 quad 1 wins. They're now 6-6 in quad 1. That resume is starting to look really good, and Kentucky is trending up at the right time now as March is right around the corner. A couple comments here from Eddie. What is Cal going to do with the rotation if Mitchell gets back to 100%? To me, that question honestly is actually relatively simple. I don't know if evening out the minutes is all that simple, but I do think that honestly, it makes your starting lineup, regardless of what you think about, whether Reed Shepherd should be in the starting lineup or not. That's something else we could talk about. But I think Trey Mitchell then just subs in probably certainly for either Justin Edwards or Adu Thiero. I don't know which one you want to start now at the 3. Justin Edwards probably gives you a little bit more skill, but Adu Thiero's just been playing better. I think it's hard to take him out of the starting lineup at this point. So I just put Trey Mitchell in for one of those guys. You certainly then become more skilled within that starting lineup. UK can field a good defensive lineup, but the problem is they become a 72-point-per-game team. And Cal find the right balance between 95 points per game and the one that gets stops? I think so, because I think we've seen that over the last couple of weeks. Again, going into last night's game, Kentucky had posted a top 10 defense over a 2-week period. It's still I think it was 26th this morning now over a 5-game period. Like, that's getting to be a pretty good sample size against a really good stretch of teams that when you get into that 25 to 30 range, like that's what the championship caliber teams have. We always talk about teams that finish top 20 in offense, top 20 in defense in KenPom to win the championship. Well, Kentucky's not going to get there defensively, but they might get there over the last month, 6 weeks of the season. And I think that really obviously is going to tell you the story a lot more than what they did months ago. UK had halves of 59, 58 in the last 4 games, and same versus 2 NCAA teams. Exactly, and that's what makes this team so dangerous. Is that I tweeted something out after the game last night. And obviously, it didn't work, admittedly, against Texas A&M. Texas A&M scores 97 points. Of course, that was not in regulation, but Wade Taylor IV goes nuclear. The other guys, Tyrese Radford, he goes nuclear, and Kentucky can't win that game. But you get some of this last night with this game. This game is in Starkville. Mississippi State scores 89 points. That was the second most, I believe, or 87 points, excuse me. Or no, it was 89. Second most they had scored all season. They make 11 threes, which is the fourth most they made all season. They made them about 11 percentage points above their average. Kentucky scores 91. They win. People kind of get frustrated with my kind of spiel of go score 90, nothing else matters. Well, it didn't matter last night. And some people came back at me with Texas A&M. If we would have scored 90 in regulation, it wouldn't have mattered then either. So, yeah, I think what Kentucky is able to do offensively, it puts so much pressure on the opposing team to be nearly perfect on their end in order to not get themselves beat. So that's my take on Kentucky right now. But we will move on to some other topics that we've gotten Big Blue Nation satisfied with some Cats talk. The other big story coming out of last night was Kansas losing at home in Allen Fieldhouse to BYU. Now, I've been pretty outspoken this year about not buying in to the BYU hype. I still feel that way. I still don't think they're all that good, but they are now 8-7 in league play with a big win over Kansas last night. But this was exactly the type of game that the Jayhawks leave themselves susceptible to because they cannot shoot the basketball. They go 3 of 15 from deep last night. Nick Timberlake, the guy that they bring in from Towson to be their three-point shooter, he goes 1 for 6. You get 0 for 5 from Johnny Furphy. Those are your two shooters. They go 1 for 11. Kansas ain't going to win many games when those two guys are 1 for 11. Hunter Dickinson has a pretty good game, but he's always 6 of 15 from the free throw line. Like, that is just not a good recipe when you're 3 of 15 from the three-point line, 19 of 31 from the free throw line. That's how you get beat at home, especially when you consider BYU as the inverse of that. BYU last night shoots 13 of 34 from 3, which is pretty normal from them. They're a high-volume shooting team, a very skilled team on the perimeter, and then they're 19 of 24 from the free throw line. So that's what gets you beat at home. And one of the things I want to talk about, I'm going to pull up the tweet here just to make sure I get it all. But last night, so shout out Mark Pope, former Kentucky Wildcat. I'm going to pull up what I said last night. I always like to talk about never take winning for granted. So here's some of the things that happened last night. And again, it's why you can never worry about how ugly. Kentucky almost blew the game last night against Mississippi State, but this is why you never take winning for granted. Every win is a good win. Every win should be celebrated. BYU won at number 7 Kansas last night. Wake Forest lost at Notre Dame last night. That is a top of the ACC team losing to a bottom of the ACC team. Texas Tech got dominated in Lubbock by Texas. Vanderbilt went on the road and won at Arkansas. Number 22 Utah State needed overtime to survive against an 11-16 Fresno State team. Nevada went on the road and won at Colorado State. So these are a bunch of results that I want Kentucky fans, or I shouldn't say Kentucky fans. Again, this is not a Kentucky show, but I want fans of college basketball to remember that. When they play a lesser team at home this coming week, like Kentucky, their next 2 games, hosting at Arkansas, hosting Vanderbilt. Those are games that can only hurt you. But look at some of these results. Like, do you think that Colorado State expected to lose at home? No. Do you think that Arkansas? I know Arkansas is not very good. Do you think they thought they were going to lose at home to Vanderbilt? Obviously not. Do you think Wake Forest thought they were going to go and lose on the road to one of the worst teams in the ACC? No, obviously not. So you celebrate your wins and you take them for what they are worth. Travis, friend of the program, says, sounds like I should wait till next year to bet college basketball. Well, with the way things are going right now for me, and I think maybe you should stick to your NBA props. And I can't hit a bet to save my life right now. I'm still riding pretty well. I'm still 56% on the season, which is a money making venture. But all of that for me was done in November and December. Honestly, at this point, like I'm not making money in 2024 for being completely transparent. So, but it's a roller coaster. Maybe we can get hot when the calendar turns to March. But I wanted to get that in there about some of these results, and again, it has been the overwhelming story of college basketball is the parity, is top 25 teams losing, top 10 teams losing when they go on the road and play unranked opponents. So never take winning for granted. Celebrate all your wins, and especially this time of year, it is just about the result. Like there's not all that much time to fix things at this point, or to improve your ball screen defense, or become a better rebounding team, or certainly like become a better shooting team. None of that stuff's changing at this point. You are who you are. You're just trying to win the darn basketball games. And some teams are going to do a better job than others down the stretch. Let's look at what we have on tonight's slate. First and foremost, some really big games in the Southeastern Conference, namely Auburn at Tennessee tonight. Obviously, one of these teams is going to lose the basketball game. Tennessee is tied for first place with Alabama at 11-3, and they get to host Auburn, who was 10-4, tied with South Carolina. I think that certainly being at home in Knoxville gives Tennessee the edge here, but I like them anyway. I think Jonas Adu can match up with Johnny Broome and those guys as well as anybody. I love the ways Kai Ziegler's playing of late. Obviously, you still have Dalton Connect, who is going to be the best player on the basketball floor tonight when these two teams play. But major implications at the top of the SEC standings. Tennessee can really put themselves in a position to win the league with a win like this. Auburn puts themselves back in a position to compete with Tennessee and Alabama at the top. Or they can have 5 losses, and now they're all of a sudden in risk of not even getting that double bye in the SEC tournament. Right now in the SEC standings, let's just look at it. You have Alabama and Tennessee at 11-3. You have Auburn and South Carolina at 10-4. You have Kentucky at 10-5. Then you have Florida at 9-5. They're hosting Missouri tonight. So if you assume they get to 10-5, there's going to be 6 teams separated by no more than 2 games between 3 and 5 losses this evening, going down to the final 3 games of the conference slate. Still pretty much anybody in 1 through 6 can finish in any of those given spots as we get in to the final, nearing the final week of the regular season and nearing March. Ole Miss is hosting Alabama tonight. That's one where if Alabama trips up on the road to a good, team coached by Chris Beard there in Oxford, then that makes things even more interesting. There's a scenario where nobody in the SEC, there's a realistic scenario where nobody in the SEC has less than 4 losses tonight. Now all of a sudden it is back to being wide open at the top. Northwestern and Illinois are both in action tonight in the Big Ten. Illinois hosting Minnesota, while Northwestern has to go on the road to play at Maryland. These are 2 teams looking to compete towards the top of the league still. I mean, obviously Purdue's probably going to run away and win this one. Again, they're 14-3, but Illinois is 11-5. Northwestern is 10-6. Both of those teams still competing for second place in the league. You had Iowa State hosting Oklahoma tonight. Iowa State still just 1 game behind Houston, with Houston's win over the Cyclones and that being their only game this year. It's essentially a 2-game lead for the Cougars. So very unlikely that Iowa State can get an outright win of the Big 12, but they could at least get a share of it there at the top. That's one thing quickly, pet peeve of mine. There are tiebreakers for a reason. There's one team that's going to have the number 1 seed in your conference tournament. This always made me mad as a Division III coach. It still makes me mad as a fan media member of Division I basketball. There only is one conference winner every season. To me, there's no such thing as a share. There is a tiebreaker system. It isn't a coin flip. It's made up of real things that happened on the court, like head-to-head record against the first place team, second place team, etc. So all this stuff like, well, we shared the Big 12 title. No, you didn't. Like if Houston and Iowa State both finish up with 4 losses and Houston's number 1 seed, Houston won the league. Iowa State did not. Anyway, off my soapbox there. I will quickly address this question from Eddie. How much money is Hubbard going to make floating his name out there in the portal in a few weeks? Man, that kid is incredible. I was a big fan of his coming into the game last night. I talked him up pretty heavily. I was talking about trying to guard him like an Alabama guy last night. Obviously, that didn't work out, letting him go 7 for 14. But yeah, he's incredible. And the dude scored like 4,300 points. He's the all-time leading scorer in Mississippi history, high school. So they got an absolute steal from him. He gets so much elevation on his jump shot. Like, it's meaningless that dude's 5'10", 5'11". He jumps 40 inches to shoot the ball. Incredible player. Big one tonight in the Big East to watch as well. This, to me, the second best game aside from Auburn at Tennessee is you get Seton Hall at Creighton. Seton Hall still quietly there with Coach Shaheen Holloway. They're 11-5 in the Big East. Now a game ahead of, or I guess a half game ahead of Creighton at 11-6. Marquette is 12-4. These teams still have a chance to compete for second place. UConn, the defending national champs, they're running away at 15-2. But Seton Hall at Creighton. Creighton's looking to bounce back from their loss at St. John's earlier this week. And then Seton Hall, they've won 3 straight. So certainly kind of a spot play here. Probably going to be a lot of people jumping on Creighton this evening. And then you get Arizona going to Arizona State. Arizona's still trying to build a number 1 seed resume. They recently lost, though, at home to Washington State, bounced back with a win against the Huskies of Washington, but need to go on the road and beat the Sun Devils tonight if you want to maintain any chance of securing a number 1 seed in the NCAA tournament. I think that pretty much does it for what we wanted to cover today. I wanted to get into some of those great games on the slate this evening. Again, a lot of hay to be made tonight in the Southeastern Conference, especially at the top of the standings. I think a lot of eyes are going to be on that Seton Hall Creighton game in Illinois, and Northwestern still jockeying for second place potentially in the Big Ten. You also get South Carolina, Texas A&M as well. I should have mentioned that one in the SEC. Another team, again, as South Carolina's up there towards the top of that, they could lose tonight and drop to 5 losses if they can't win in College Station. Iowa State still trying to make some noise in the Big 12 as well. Quickly, I want to pull up this tweet from Projection Sports, actually a friend of mine from high school that runs the account. If you don't follow Projection Sports, please go and do that after we finish this show. He had a graphic up today. Tonight's league title clinching scenarios. So Appalachian State has a chance to clinch the Sun Belt. We all kind of thought that was going to be James Madison's league to win, but Appalachian State actually has a chance to clinch it tonight. Eastern Kentucky they've actually already clinched a share, but we just talked about we don't like shares here at All Fired Up with Brandon Ramsey, but they can clinch the Atlantic Sun outright. High Point can clinch the Big South with a win this evening. Indiana State can clinch the Missouri Valley, and Oakland can clinch the Horizon League as well. So this time of year, teams can start winning conferences, and keep an eye on those matchups tonight. And again, shout out to Projection Sports. That'll do it for today's episode of All Fired Up with Brandon Ramsey. Please make sure you are subscribed to the YouTube channel here, the Brandon Ramsey College Basketball Show, where we host these episodes every Wednesday at 12:30 p.m. Eastern Time live on the YouTube channel. You can also find the Brandon Ramsey College Basketball Show on podcast, Spotify, or wherever you do listen to those podcast episodes every Monday and Friday. And then also follow me on Twitter at BRamseyKSR. There we go. Projection Sports is in the chat now. They were listening as I gave the shout out. That's always fun. So yeah, thank you guys for listening. And until next time, enjoy this evening of college basketball.